A CRN original.
Attention, you are about to hear the captivating voice of an icon in the movie industry. You have heard him and seen him in performances in over 140 films. He's met and influenced many world leaders, and now he's about to tell you how to unite the America he loves.
That job's filled.
Unique.
Unique.
Brilliant.
Brilliant.
And unpredictable.
Unpredictable.
Robert Davi is a Renaissance man who writes, directs, sings, and does it all with excellence.
Yeah, it's okay. We're all very impressed, but let's get on with it now.
Robert Davi believes he should use his voice to both repay and help unite America, the America that made his dreams come true.
No more Mr. Nice Guy.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is The Robert Davi Show. Hello, friends. Mike Garey sitting in for the Robert Davi, the great Robert Davi. We're going to have more on that in just a second. And thank you so much for joining us here, CRN Digital Talk Radio, CRNTalk.com. Streaming live coast to coast and around the world on CRNTalk.com. Also available for all of our great affiliates. Also broadcasting live on Facebook, Facebook.com/CRNTalk. And we are happy to have, after a week away from the CRN family, we have the young shooter Nick Davi back in studio. He was in Hilton Head, South Carolina on vacay for the Thanksgiving holiday. How you doing, Nick? How was your trip?
It was great, Mike. It was great. How was your Thanksgiving?
It was fine, thank you. And I understand we have some breaking news here, folks, that Robert Davi is back on U.S. soil.
He is back in America.
He is back. He has come on home. He's back on the American soil. Apparently, the project he's been working on is moving quite along, and we're looking forward to having him back, perhaps maybe even this week, but definitely next week. He's going to tell us all about it, and it's going to be apparently Nick got a sneak preview of this very special project last night. Can you reveal anything, or is it still embargoed?
I can't, unfortunately, reveal any information, you know, but all I can say is
it's going to create a stir.
Yeah,
it's going to create a stir. Like it will be
really good though.
It's going to be a conversation starter for sure.
It's really high quality though. You can tell, like. It really pays important attention to detail as well, which I always love to see in movies, because there's a lot of movies where they're great films, but they can be some of the best films if they just paid a little more closer attention to detail than they did.
Yeah, I think that's why the great filmmakers in our culture, you know, they pay that great attention to. I'm thinking specifically of Scorsese, of Michael Mann. It's just every little thing is considered. So very much looking forward to Robert returning, making his triumphant return to these microphones, and it's going to be fantastic. All right, story time, folks. I witnessed kind of a heavy scene over the weekend. This was on Saturday, and so I was coming home from the studio on Saturday after producing some high-quality broadcasts here at CRN Digital Talk Radio, and I drove home into my neighborhood of Highland Park, California, which is just about 15 minutes northeast of downtown Los Angeles. It's a historic community, becoming highly gentrified, but still, you know, has got a lot of character and soul to the neighborhood. And my kind of routine is that I will stop at a local Rite Aid, which is blocks away from my house, and I will pick up, you know, some supplies for the night. And then I will go across the street to a great little Mexican restaurant where I get my delicious al pastor burrito. And so as I approach the Rite Aid, I kind of see a car parked right in front of the Rite Aid. It's a late model a Honda Fit, baby blue in color, parked right in front of the Rite Aid, right in front of the business. And I kind of didn't pay much attention, and I walked in and I completed my transaction. And the clerk who noticed, she asked me, she's like, have you seen those two people out front? And I didn't know what she's talking about. And so I shook my head. And so then I walked outside and I noticed what she was talking about. That same vehicle that I noticed contained two individuals, a man and a woman. The man was in the passenger seat. The woman was in the driver's seat. All windows were open on this vehicle. This was probably around, I'd say, 6 p.m. at night. The sun was just setting. And this couple were obviously incapacitated. They were both slumped over The woman slumped over towards the left-hand side of the vehicle. The man slumped back into his seat, head turned back, and you could see drool coming from his mouth and his nose. And immediately I recognized what this was. This was a severe opioid toxicity. And so I called 911. And they transferred me to the LA City Fire Department, and I said, I believe we have a possible opiate overdose at the Rite Aid parking lot at the corner of Avenue 64 and Figueroa Street. And the dispatcher couldn't have been more matter-of-fact about it, indicating that she receives calls like this quite often. And she says, well, can you see if they're breathing or not? And I'm like, well, it does appear that they're breathing. And she says, well, can you go over and knock on the window and see if they're okay? And I really wasn't comfortable doing that. You never know what's going to happen. And so they sent somebody over. And the firehouse is just literally blocks away from where this took place. And so after I made the call, I walked over to just right across the street, picked up my delicious al pastor burrito. And by the time that I walked back to the Rite Aid parking lot where I parked my car, the fire department had already arrived, an ambulance and 2 fire trucks. And I saw that they immediately took the man out of the car. He needed very much assistance, and loaded him into the back of the ambulance. As they were doing that, the female in the driver's seat, she became a little bit combative and confrontational, very slurred, very incoherent, but then proceeded, after she, voiced her displeasure with what was happening, she then proceeded just to nod right off again. And I approached the ambulance, and I said to who looked like the sergeant in command of the fire department responding to this incident, and I says, hey, I'm the person that called this in. And he said right away, he says, oh, thanks a lot. And I'm okay, no problem. But I'm like, well, are they going to be okay? And of course, he can't give me a definitive answer based on patient confidentiality laws and probably LAFD policy. But he just kind of gave me that kind of slow head shake kind of thing, indicating that this, quite possibly won't have a good outcome. And I don't know if he was speaking directly to the situation at hand or the broader opioid crisis that we have in America. I know, folks, I've talked about this before, but this incident, this scene that I witnessed last weekend was just a very, very kind of heavy scene. And I will say the reason that it stuck with me is that I've seen junkies before. Everybody's seen junkies before. Passed out in the middle of the sidewalk, usually look like homeless people. Usually you see them in homeless encampments where you're driving along. Just in fact, right now, when I was driving into the freeway, I passed my local homeless encampment where I pass every day on the way to work, and there was another person sitting on a recliner out front of their tent, obviously on a nod as well. But what struck me about this situation at the Rite Aid parking lot is that these were not your prototypical junkies just by sight. They didn't seem malnourished. They didn't seem dirty or unkempt. This was your standard middle-aged couple. I mean, they could have been maybe a couple years younger than my parents' age. They were in, like I said, a late model Honda Fit. And at 6 o'clock on a Saturday, in the middle of public, here are 2 seemingly well put together people passed out on opiates. And this is just indicative of how endemic opioid addiction is in this country. It can't be ignored anymore, folks. And I don't know if this speaks to issues of class, race, and economics, because seeing what, normally a couple that you probably see on the baseball field cheering on their young son or daughter nodded off. I could also see the LAFD remove some paraphernalia from their car. I didn't see what it was, but I'm guessing it was some sort of syringe. Multiple syringes, it looked like. How did we get here? Drug addiction drug culture, it's usually confined to quote-unquote the ghetto, or it's held behind closed doors, the old mother's little helper example.
I think it's held behind closed doors a lot more than people think.
I think you're right. I think you're 100% correct. And I think also, and you know, we're going to talk about this in the next segment as well, is that opioid addiction, via the overprescription of opioid-based painkillers starting in the 1990s, normalized opioid consumption. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I know who've told me stories in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, even the 90s, where they would throw their teenage kids out of the house for smoking marijuana. But that same parent who just threw their kid out of the house for smoking pot has a medicine cabinet full of Percocet, of Seconal, of Valium, of Vicodin, of Oxycontin, Xanax. But those are legal. Can't be bad. A doctor gave me a prescription for these. Look, folks. This is real. Do I know if that couple survived this opioid overdose? I don't. I drove by the next day and that same car was still in that same spot. So obviously they took both of them to the hospital, if not to jail. Or did they take him to jail? We're going to talk about Prop 36 next on why perhaps California, if not the nation, is being too lenient. Davi, back in a minute.
I'm Al Simon, 91 years young. I created Balance 7 20 years ago. I don't believe God intended for us to be old and sick. For 10 years, I studied pH and how important it is to the immune system. No doctor or hospital can do what Balance 7 can do for you. Balance 7 is the key to unlocking a healthy immune system. In 3 days' time, you'll feel more energy, less joint discomfort, and clarity of thinking. Bring your body back to balance. Order now and receive free shipping and a free bottle of My Smooth Skin.
Get your body back in pH balance with Balance7.com. Balance 7 unlocks the immune system. Your body will respond in a wondrous way. Your energy level will go up, joint discomfort will be reduced, and heartburn no longer a problem. We have a 100% money-back guarantee. You have everything to gain. If you're sick and you don't want to be, Balance 7 is the answer. If you're healthy and want to stay healthy, Balance 7 is the answer. Go to Balance7.com. That's Balance7.com. Use the code word BALANCE and get free shipping. Balance7.com. That's Balance7.com.
What are you so happy about?
I'm on the pill.
Aren't you two a bit old to worry about having more kids?
Not her, me.
You lost me there, buddy.
Steelman pills. Things weren't always looking up, if you catch my drift. So, my doctor prescribed me a little something.
Like Viagra?
Yeah, but that's expensive, and it wasn't covered by my insurance. Steelman pills cost me less than $3 a pill, and virtually the same effect. I just called and got over 40 pills for only $99.
I have this friend who might be looking and...
Well, if your friend wants some help, the consultation is free over the phone. No clinic. Steelman Pill sends it in the mail in a confidential package.
I'm on it. I mean, my friend will be on it.
Steelman Pills, going the extra mile to help men with erectile dysfunction.
800-605-1683. 800-605-1683. 800-605-1683. That's 800-605-1683.
Let's talk about your credit cards. When you first start using them, it's a slow drip. You make charges, then more charges, then bills come, and they keep coming. When you open your statements, the floodgates come pouring in. You realize you have more credit card debt than you can afford, and you're barely making the minimum payments. Wouldn't it be nice to make one affordable payment and have all your credit card bills covered? Make this free call and learn our responsible way to get your credit card bills paid and under control.
Sponsored by Consumer Education Services, a nonprofit organization.
800-876-3643. 800-876-3643. 800-876-3643. That's 800-876-3643.
CESI is not a loan company. The establishment of a debt management plan may adversely affect your credit rating. Non-payment of debt may lead creditors to increase finance and other charges to undertake collection activity, including liquidation.
Robert Davi.
You know, I'm the one delivering the message, not receiving it.
And we are back, Robert Davi. Back in American soil, and we'll be back in this studio before you know it. So keep your eyes and your ears open for that. Talking about the opioid crisis scenario, a situation that I witnessed over the weekend, seeing two middle-aged, a couple, obviously looking very middle class, overdosed on opioids at 6 o'clock p.m. on a Saturday in the middle of a Rite Aid parking lot in Highland Park, California, United States of America. CDC, studied extensively the opioid crisis. Say the first wave of the opioid epidemic began in the 1990s due to the push towards opioid medications for chronic pain management. The pain clinic. You never heard of the pain clinic until the 90s. And going back to that, I've read a lot about this too, is that medical science for a long time thought that pain was a good thing, that pain was an indicator not only of injury but of healing. And people, Americans, the American medical intelligentsia says that no, we can cure pain. We can cure all kinds of pain, chronic pain, intermediate pain, transitory pain, by prescribing opioids. This wasn't done in a clinical sense, whereas, you'd go to the hospital, you'd take your pain medication, stay in the hospital, recover, recuperate, and then leave. No, this is left to the patient themselves, oftentimes to manage their pain on their own without doctor's supervision. And so that take 2 times a day for pain is if needed became 4 times a day, became 5 times a day, became 6 times a day, became 18 times a day. In 2018, the prescription opioid rate, the number of prescription opioids prescribed, was 51.4 prescriptions per 100 people. It sounds pretty high. One county alone in West Virginia, one small rural county, had over 9.6 million Oxycontin pills prescribed in just 1 year for a population of less than 25,000 people. Obviously, policymakers and the pharmaceutical companies share some of the blame, but that's capitalism, folks. They're servicing a demand. They had the supply, and there is a demand. I don't really put this at the feet of the Sacklers, so on and so forth, regardless of what the emails have said. You can look that up. Pain management. I mean, I know people who have suffered chronic pain, and it's debilitating. It can ruin your life. But also, my personal theory, too, is that this speaks to the broken U.S. healthcare system overall. Whereas people don't have time, especially those of lower incomes, don't have the time or the kind of employment that will allow them to recover from injuries. Let's say you're working at a warehouse making $14 an hour, and you got a family, you're the sole provider. You hurt your back. You need 2 weeks to rest your back up, not be back in that warehouse lugging boxes around. What's going to happen? You don't have that paid time off. You don't have that paid sick leave. You're going to go to work. And in order to function at work, to do that kind of physical labor, you're going to take opioids. I add parenthetically, too, that industrial accidents are up, too, based on workers who are under the influence of prescription medications. So what's the answer? I mean, what do we do? What we've seen is that... Oh, I should add, too, I was speaking to a really good friend of mine who I won't name, who is a recovering addict and alcoholic, has been clean for many years. He attends both AA, Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and NA, Narcotics Anonymous meetings. And he said something that really struck with me. He says at the NA meetings where he goes, and because he also, does a lot of fellowship, a lot of service. That's one thing about the 12-step program. Even if you have picadillos about it, is that the recovery through service, I think, is a really important process. That an addict, an alcoholic, can keep their addiction in check by helping others with their own addictions. It's really a positive thing. But he was saying that the NA, the Narcotics Anonymous meetings that he attends and he leads, they do not see any new members, unlike the Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous, every meeting there's one or two new people coming in who've decided that they've hit bottom and want to clean up their act and seek recovery. But in terms of Narcotics Anonymous, it's the same people week after week. Why is that? It's because the new addicts, the new opioid addicts, they don't live long enough to go to recovery. They don't live long enough to hit the bottom. The bottom for the modern opioid addict is the grave. And so these Narcotics Anonymous meetings are just full of recovering addicts in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. They're not seeing the 25-year-olds, the 30-year-olds, the 35-year-olds because they're all dead. Mark Maron speaks a lot about this too. That there's never been a more dangerous time to be a drug addict. This has a lot to do with fentanyl. Fentanyl is being now cut with heroin, being cut with cocaine, being cut with any illicit drug to increase the potency, to make that bag of heroin for the dealer go farther, where you can make 1 kilo of heroin and 2.5 kilos of heroin by adding just a sprinkle of fentanyl and other cutting agents.
What's even crazier to me is that the buyers know this is happening, so they know it's pretty much a 50-50 shot. Like, okay, this is life or death if I even do this.
Certain countries, I believe Ireland is doing this, and other Scandinavian countries, which are far more progressive about this than we are at this point, are offering for sale testing kits where you can actually take your illicit heroin and test it to see if it's laced with fentanyl, and if it is laced with fentanyl, if it's going to be a fatal dose. That seems like a reasonable idea. But in this country, we've had major controversies over issues such as needle exchange. I mean, the most effective way to transmit the HIV virus is through intravenous drug use, blood-to-blood contact. But so what's going to happen to that couple that I saw? I'm guessing that they were hospitalized, and if they did survive, they had possession of illicit substances and paraphernalia, so that's illegal. Quite possibly they'll be charged with the crime. But there's a little thing in California called Proposition 36. It was passed in the year 2000. And the guise of Proposition 36 is that it was an initiative that passed that permanently changed state law to allow qualifying defendants convicted of non-violent drug possession offenses to receive probationary sentence in lieu of incarceration. As a condition of probation, defendants are required to participate and complete a licensed and/or certified community drug treatment program. If the defendant fails to complete this program and violates any of the terms of the conditions of their probation, then probation can be revoked. The defendant may be required for an additional sentence, which may include incarceration. This proposition passed with over 60% of the vote and is now law. As of July 1st, 2001, $120 million for treatment services has been allocated every year. So we're past $1 billion, folks. The California taxpayers is spending for drug rehabilitation for offenders sentenced under Proposition 36. Is this the right thing to do? Davi, back in a minute.
When you really want Italian food, you've got to get to Columbo's.
Excuse me?
Columbo's Italian Steakhouse and Jazz Club.
Excuse
Colorado Boulevard, Eagle Rock. It's that little neighborhood place you wish was down the street from you.
Excuse me?
What's going on?
I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, even my little sister.
Now, that's nice. Now, what are you hoping for? A bike?
Yep.
Clothes?
Okay.
A soccer ball?
Muy excelente! But you know what I really want? I want to be with my mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, and even my little sister. And going over to Columbo's.
Great steaks, the freshest fish, Columbo's Italian family specialties. They just treat you right.
And meatballs and spaghetti, super yum yum!
Columbo's, right any season, but especially this time of the year. Columbo's, that little neighborhood place you wish was down the street from you.
Mangia bene and buon Natale. Can we leave one meatball out for Santa?
For the getaway of your dreams, come to Hawaii's playground, Kaanapali Beach Resort, on the fun side of Maui, where the world comes to play. Find your spot on Kaanapali Beach with 3 miles of white sand, 12 resort properties, 2 golf courses, and 2 shopping centers. Enjoy the playground of Hawaii's ancient royalty. Kaanapali Beach Resort is Hawaii's original master planned destination resort and home of the Hawaii Food and Wine Festival. With views of 2 neighboring islands, you can breathe in the land's natural beauty from your favorite resort or golf fairway. Come experience Kaanapali's own special brand of Hawaiian hospitality with world-class dining, relaxing resorts, water sports, and activities of every kind. For romantic, family, and great friend getaways, discover the options of Kaanapali Beach Resort, where the world comes to play. Plan your getaway today. Visit KaanapaliResort.com. That's KAANAPALI Resort.com.
What are you going to do with your old car? You can try selling it, you could junk it, or you could donate it to Heritage for the Blind. Your car will be towed away for free, and your donation is tax deductible. Just call 1-800-785-9618. Heritage for the Blind accepts cars, vans, trucks, and boats. It doesn't matter if your vehicle runs or not. It will be towed away for free, and you'll be supporting those that need help. Heritage for the Blind is a nonprofit organization that helps the visually impaired live fuller lives. Call right now to donate your car, and as a special thank you for calling, you'll receive a free 3-day vacation voucher to many exciting locations. Call Heritage for the Blind right now, 1-800-785-9618. Donating is easy, and your vehicle is towed away for free. Plus, you'll get a free vacation voucher. Call now, 1-800-785-9618. That's 1-800-785-9618.
If Ernest Hemingway was alive today, would he say this to you?
Shakespeare, Mark Twain, Edgar Allan Poe, all great writers. And after reading your book, I simply must add you to the list.
Wait, you don't have a book yet. So make a free call to Page Publishing. Their expert staff can help you turn your book idea into a real book, a masterpiece that could someday make the bestseller list in hard copy and digitally all across the world. Page Publishing can help you completely take your idea for a book, write it, and publish it. So if you want to join the ranks of some of the most famous authors in the world, call now for a free information kit. Turn your book idea into publishing gold. Make a free call right now to Page Publishing.
800-378-3212. 800-378-3212. 800-378-3212. That's 800-378-3212.
The Robert Davi Show.
I'm Dwayne Robinson, LAPD. I'm in charge here. Not anymore.
Robert Davi Show. Mike Garey sitting in once again. Siren Digital Talk Radio, SirenTalk.com, SirenTalk.com, Facebook.com/SirenTalk. Thank you so much for joining us. Speaking of Proposition 36 vis-a-vis the opioid addiction, and listeners out there might be saying, hey, Mike G, what do you know about any of this? I did drugs growing up. I outgrew it like most people do. Some don't. Some get stuck in that drug culture. Some use it to alleviate problems. You know, it's a really good way to forget about your problems? Doing drugs. You know, it's like a really not healthy way of dealing with your problems? Doing drugs. And addiction is tough, folks. I mean, hey, I just stepped out right now to smoke a cigarette. I've been trying to quit smoking for years. It's really, really hard. You know, it's a really good way to quit smoking or quit drugs or quit anything, not having access to it. You know, it's a really good way to not have access to something, being incarcerated. Now, I know some of you will say, well, there's plenty of drug use that goes on within jails and prisons itself. That's not the addict's fault. That's the guards' fault, folks. The guards are the ones that are bringing that in. That's why you see the California Department of Corrections, the third largest law enforcement agency in the country, fight so hard to not allow searches. Or, for example, there was a bill that would want to not allow Department of Corrections personnel to possess cellular telephones while they were on the job working in the prisons or the jails. Sounds reasonable, right? The union that represents the California Department of Corrections was aghast. They would not have it. And so as we see now, contraband, such as cellular phones, such as illicit contraband of drugs, are coming into the prisons. Well, Proposition 36, what that did was that it would furlough those sentences for people who were found guilty of drug possession and offer probation, like I said. And conditions of that probation would be treatment. Over $1 billion has been allocated so far from the state of California to provide and finance for this treatment. It's a scam, folks. There's a lot of good rehabilitation centers. And like I said, 12-step programs have been proven extremely effective in treating addiction. But I know someone personally that opened one of these drug rehabilitation centers in the lieu of Proposition 36 passing, because he knew that he could game the system and get millions and millions of dollars. And it was so interesting to watch this man's progression. He was a member of a spiritual community based in Eastern philosophy, where materialism was considered anathema to their philosophy. But he opened this clinic, and he was able to receive millions of dollars in state funds to counsel drug addicts. You know what he did? He bought himself a BMW. He bought himself a vacation home in Maui. And it became a revolving door where this wasn't a locked facility. There's nothing in Prop 36 where these addicts need to be in a detox locked facility. There's nothing about random testing, otherwise, unless it's stipulated directly in the sentence itself. And so you'd have the people come in and they'd sit around and they'd talk and then they'd leave and then they'd reoffend. They'd get convicted again of drug possession, once again go through the Proposition 36 cycle, have their sentence suspended and furloughed, give it another chance, go to that same clinic. I believe it was $36,000 per patient that the state would finance. It's capitalism. Supply and demand. Is this also a reason why we see this homeless epidemic? I mean, this is a liberal for me to say, and if you listen to me before on the show, I'm a centrist Democrat. I support criminal justice reform. I think we incarcerate too many people. I think we incarcerate too many of the people who don't have the means or the ability to defend themselves properly. But this opioid epidemic, as we're seeing the demographics behind it, it's largely Caucasian. Also, I'm seeing statistics right now off a 2020 study from the CDC that more women are addicted to opioids than men right now by a factor of about 10%.
Makes sense. I mean, the modeling community, I know, has some real issues with drugs. Like those girls, they don't eat. They just chew pills, man. It's a real thing and it's scary.
And also, I mean, I knew somebody who was a terrible, terrible cocaine addict. And in order for that person to even function, they would have to supplement their cocaine addiction with other drugs. They would need Valium to come down, Ambien to come down. They would need Xanax in the morning to even themselves out. And then the cycle would start once again, where around 5, 6 p.m., you start drinking, you start doing cocaine, and then repeat. Yeah. Only 34% of drug offenders complete treatment under Proposition 36. Governor Schwarzenegger, he wanted to reform this bill, and he actually wanted to enact Senate Bill 1137, which would have given judges the power to sentence jail time for a brief period to drug offenders who relapsed. Of course, Proposition 36 and the lobbyists behind it, lobbyists who I would add or were deeply involved and paid for by these clinics themselves, because it's the golden goose. They actually slapped an injunction on Senate Bill 1137 and therefore did not go into effect. Also, Prop 36, why is that not retroactive? I mean, what if you got convicted for possession in 1980, served a 5-year sentence, got clean, but that felony conviction's still on your record? Look, folks, you got to put them in jail. That couple that I saw, they may have never even been arrested before. They've maybe never even had any sort of interaction with the criminal justice system outside of a parking ticket. I don't know. I'm just speculating here. You got to put them in jail. First of all, jail is a deterrent, and jail is a great place to quit drugs. Treatment is very, very effective, but 34%, only 34% of drug addicts who go through the Proposition 36 system complete the treatment itself. And I'm not seeing any data here from the CDC on whether or not what the relapse percentage is of that 34%. Do I think that we coddle addiction in America? Well, first of all, do I believe addiction is a disease? Yes. Yes, I do believe addiction is disease. I believe that there's genetics involved. I believe that there's personality disorders involved. I believe it can be hereditary. But there comes a point where not only are you damaging yourself, but you're damaging society as a whole. Think of the children. I know, think of the children. Rite Aid's got a great ice cream parlor. There was kids in there. How do you explain to your kid when your kid says, Mom, Dad, what's wrong with those people? Are they sleeping? How do you explain that? You're like, no, sorry, little Johnny. They're whacked out of their gourd on heroin in a Rite Aid parking lot at 6 p.m. on a Saturday. So that couple that I saw, I hope they're okay. I hope they get the help they need. But sadly, what I think is going to happen is that they're going to take advantage of Proposition 36, plead nolo contendo, not serve a day in jail, get involved in a diversion program, perhaps go to a couple meetings, and then relapse. Because, folks, the one thing that I do know is that you can't quit drugs unless you want to quit drugs. And you have to put somebody in a position where they can quit drugs. And the only place that a person really can quit drugs is either if they want to and they work the program, or if they don't have access to the drugs.
There's only so much you can tell a person, you know?
Exactly. You can't help somebody unless they want to help themselves. Davi, back in a minute.
Have you heard about Vine to Bar chocolate? It's the winemaker's chocolate, the world's first chocolate made with well-vined Chardonnay marc from the beautiful coastal vineyards of North America. Gently pressed grapes are harvested after juicing, dried and finely milled and carefully blended into the finest dark chocolate. The Chardonnay marc contains highly beneficial grape nutrients, flavanols, and has a natural sweetness that flavors the luscious dark chocolate. Mouth-watering, flavorful, delectable dark chocolate goodness with Chardonnay sweetness and beneficial nutrients. And it's alcohol-free, too. It's Vine to Bar chocolate. Order some today at vinetobar.com. That's VINETOBAR.com. Cold shipped to your door, it's Vine to Bar. Vine to Bar chocolate. Visit us at vinetobar.com.
Does your current bathroom need to be updated immediately? Introducing One Day Bath and Shower Remodeling, the complete and hassle-free way to get the new bathroom of your dreams in as little as 1 day, and for as little as $199 a month. Yes, the experts at One Day Bath and Shower Remodeling will come to you anywhere in the country and show you all the customized options. Now you can have a brand new bathroom in as little as 1 day. Large or small bathrooms, if you want a new bathtub or shower installed, we can do it in as little as 1 day. And if you call right now, you can save $750 off your remodel. We make it easy by offering you financing as low as $199 per month. Call now to schedule your free in-home consultation.
855-525-7454. or 855-525-7454. That's 855-525-7454. Attention real estate investors. Do you need cash immediately? If you own one or multiple rental properties, you can use your equity to get cash out fast. The best part is we don't need tax returns or even a good credit score. At America's Loan Source, we are not a bank and we don't have bank rules. We make the decisions to loan you money, and there's no limit how much we can give you. Some clients have gotten as much as $500,000 or more within days. Use the money any way you want. If you own one rental property or 100 and COVID has left you in a cash crunch, we can help you turn your equity into fast cash. Call now for details and close in as little as 10 days and get the cash you need. 800-353-1760. 800-353-1760. 800-353-1760. That's 800-353-1760.
Robert Davi.
Another $80 million write-off.
I guess it's time to start cutting overhead.
And we are back, Robert Davi Show. Just to wrap this up, this topic about this opioid epidemic here in the United States is that regardless of what you might have heard me say, get help. Get help any way you can. I mean, even if it's under the guise of Proposition 36, that's a second chance. I mean, my personal opinion is that it's not going to work for everybody just based on policy and just based on human nature, but it can work for some. I'm sure it has worked for some. That 34%. But if anybody out there is struggling with opioids addiction, I really, really recommend that you go to na.org. That's Narcotics Anonymous. It's na.org. Because I think there is, in terms of recovery strength in numbers, anybody who's had experience with a 12-step program knows it can work, and it does work. And I know that there's, a lot of hesitancy about people going into the 12-step program. They might think that it's actually a guise for some sort of religious indoctrination. It's not. It depends on the meeting. You can find the right meeting for you. You can find the right people that can help you recover. And I've met so many amazing people who are recovering addicts because, like I said before, they dedicate themselves to service. Danny Trejo, I just recently read his autobiography. Danny Trejo, you might know, is a tremendous character actor. He's the Chicano gentleman who's got I'm sure you've seen him. He's got the woman in the sombrero tattoo on his chest. He was in, Heat and Blood In, Blood Out, Machete and all that. And he said something that really struck to me because he has been in the program since 1968. 50 years, folks. And he says, all the good things in my life have come from helping others. And that when I heard him say that, it just kind of raised the hair on my back of my neck, because I just thought that was so interesting. And all the people that I know who have successfully worked the program, they say something similar. That it's not only saved their lives, but it's helped them save other people's lives. And the reward behind that is a greater high than any drug there is. Okay, Nick, you want to talk about something fun?
Let's do it.
Okay. All right. It's time for the Mike and Nick bi-weekly semi-annual entertainment review. Now, Nick, you have not seen this. I have. But you are well aware of the subject matter we're about to discuss. Recently, within the past couple days, Peter Jackson, acclaimed filmmaker of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the Hobbit trilogy, and other films, he released his most recent project, something he's been working on for quite some time, and it is called Get Back. It's about the Beatles. And it's a documentary surrounding the Get Back sessions, which was a recording session and also a writing session for a TV show that never aired of Beatles material that would later be released after the band broke up on the Let It Be album. And this footage, it's apparently 60 hours of footage were available to Mr. Jackson. He whittled it down to about 8 hours. Yeah, it's about 8 hours. It's a 3-part documentary. It's available on Disney Plus. It's streaming right now. And it was fascinating. Obviously, growing up, my parents were huge Beatles fans, and I rejected that out of, teenage rebellion. But then came back because the Beatles are just a great band. They're just like one of the best bands of all time.
They're amazing.
And I love the discourse too. Just add parenthetically, the discourse whenever something Beatles related comes to the culture is that you see the Beatles are overrated takes, which are just hilarious to me.
Well, I mean, back then in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, it was you're either a Stones fan or a Beatles fan, and they just like hated each other, like the fans, for some reason.
Yeah. That's, we could do a whole show on that, and how like the Rolling Stones were like the real group, and it's funny too that McCartney recently came out and says that he thinks the Rolling Stones were just like pretty much a blues cover band, which I thought was funny.
But hey, the Beatles stole some music from the Stones.
Everybody steals.
Yeah.
Everybody steals, folks.
The Stones didn't steal from the Beatles.
Stones didn't steal from the Beatles. Beatles, I don't think necessarily stole from the Stones. I think all three of them, Led Zeppelin included, stole from Blind Willie Johnson and from Freddie King, Albert King, all that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's art, folks. I mean,
they're the roots of rock and roll. Those three guys.
Yeah.
And as well as Muddy Waters.
Yeah. Chuck Berry, Little Richard.
They're the reason why this all rock and roll is even a thing.
That's why I think that the Beatles are really important, and the Rolling Stones later on too, is that it was a gateway for people who became Beatles fans and then be like, wow, they're covering this song. This is a Chuck Berry song. I'm going to get into Chuck Berry. Mm-hmm. And I thought that brought a lot of recognition to especially the African American artists that were really heralded in the 50s. Anywho, this documentary, it took place in 1968, and the Beatles at this point were in conflict. I'm not going to, spoil anything, but, as we know, the Beatles did break up in 1970. And what was really interesting about this documentary is that it was shot shortly after the death of Bob Epstein, who was known as the Fifth Beatle. He was their longtime manager and kind of consigliere. Mr. Epstein died tragically at the age of 28 of, guess what, a drug overdose. And they were kind of rudderless after this in terms of direction, because I grew up playing in bands. And so I really, it was, listening to them, sit around and try to write new material in a social dynamic where there was quote unquote no true defined leader. Anybody who's played in a band can really identify with that. Folks, a band needs a leader. And one of the reasons the Beatles were so great is that, it was truly collaborative, but you still had Bob Epstein being like, hey, maybe, you should play that in time. Or like, hey, maybe, you should put this song on the album rather than that song. And when it's just left to the artists themselves and there's no defined leader, you could really have, death by a thousand cuts. It's like almost a stagnation by overanalyzation. And in this Get Back sessions, you could really see that Paul was trying to emerge as the leader. Mm-hmm. And what they said is, whoever wrote the song, whoever comes to the session with the song, he's kind of in charge of that song and can dictate to the other members what they want to play. First of all, that's not A, very collaborative, and B, can lead to a lot of hurt feelings. Mm-hmm. And specifically George Harrison, who at that time was emerging as a prolific songwriter, he wasn't really, his compositions weren't necessarily embraced as much as the Lennon-McCartney compositions, specifically the McCartney compositions. Also, you could see too that the direction sonically that the band was taking as Paul emerged as the principal creative force, you could see John, not necessarily because of ego, but because he wanted more rock and roll. I mean, you can tell a late Paul song because it's very symphonic. Think of Martha, My Dear. Think of She's Leaving Home. Think of Baby, I'm Amazed. Think of Let It Be Itself. Those are eponymously Paul songs because they're all piano based, they're all Paul lead sings, very kind of sweet. Mm-hmm. Whereas John kind of saw him as a rocker, and I think at that time saw him more himself as almost a punk rocker, as an avant-garde artist. And so there was tension between that. And I think that tension, especially on the Sgt. Pepper's record and the Revolver record, made for great music. But at this point,
Sgt. Pepper's, oh my God.
Sgt. Pepper's, I think, is one of the greatest records of all time. I mean, came out in early summer of 1967, and a lot of historians, rock and roll historians, and cultural historians will say that the Summer of Love started when Sgt. Pepper came out. They also say that the 60s ended when the Beatles broke up. But I really recommend it. It's the first episode is a little bit long. You're going to hear a lot of previously unreleased Beatles songs. And so
That's so sick, though. Like, come on, dude. Who's not going to love that? If you love the Beatles, that's got to be like one of the coolest things ever.
Exactly. You're going to see that. You're going to see also Paul pretty much write Get Back out of thin air. You can see in a 2-minute clip, you can see Paul literally right in front of your eyes come up with the riff and the melody for Get Back. He had nothing, and then literally 30 seconds later, he had one of their last hit singles. Also, it's the redemption of Yoko Ono, because based on the footage in this documentary, Yoko's not seen as some screaming harlot who is making John do her bidding like a marionette. No, she was in there in the recording studio sitting right next to John, which was a little bit weird. As someone who's played in bands, you usually don't have, your significant other sitting right next to you when you're A, even writing the music, and B, recording the music, but it seems like the other members were fine with it, so there you go. You can also see Paul become a little bit impatient with Ringo, because also Paul had a famous quote, a snarky quote, saying that Ringo wasn't even the best drummer in the Beatles themselves. Ringo's fine, folks. He's fine.
Leave Ringo alone.
Leave Ringo alone. He's a nice guy. But for any Beatles fan out there, it's a treat. For anybody who has played in bands or continue to play in bands, it's a treat as well, because you can really identify with the dynamics that are going on. It's a little bit long, but I do recommend it, and it sent me down kind of on a rabbit hole of Beatles associated media. I was watching the George Harrison documentary on HBO Max last night, directed by Martin Scorsese. That comes highly recommended as well. But just to end here, the Beatles are overrated, folks. Stop it.
Didn't Drake say? I think he said he had more slaps than the Beatles. Which, Drake, no, I've seen videos of you live. You can't sing, bro.
Yeah.
And people write your music.
Yeah.
You equal no talent, brother. Sit down, walk away.
But there's nothing like, 4 people coming together and making a record. And it's like a relationship. It's, you get the goods, the highs, the lows. And think of all that art that they left us. Think of the influence that they've left us. The Beatles are a great band, folks. Great band to study about composition, about arranging. So check it out, Apple TV Plus. It's called Get Back, directed by Peter Jackson. Once again, Nick, thank you very much. Thank you for listening. See you guys soon. Take care. God bless America.
Does your current bathroom need to be updated immediately? Introducing One Day Bath and Shower Remodeling, the complete and hassle-free way to get the new